This month we're examining what it means to be a people of expectation. That's our theme for the month. Yesterday I went to the kickoff event for Peace Week, and I feel like Peace Week and that event is all about expectations. It says that, Peace Week says that we are a people who expect peace. Peace for ourselves, peace for other people. And this event and all the great many events that are happening throughout the week are a lot about how we cultivate peace and how we cultivate justice and liberation for ourselves and in our community. Many of these Peace Week events are also about challenging our expectations, the expectations that get in the way of liberation for ourselves and for one another. There are two kinds of expectations that I want to mention. There are those expectations we have that are conscious, that we're aware of, and there are those that kind of hide out in our subconscious that we aren't so aware of. In our story today, the people at that fabulous dinner party had expectations that got in their way of their ability to see and welcome Ness Rudden when he came to visit with them. Were they conscious expectations? Did they see the mud and the work clothes and think that he didn't belong with them? Or were they more hidden, more subconscious expectations? Would they have said, oh, we're not classist. We don't see rich. I don't see rich or poor. I treat everybody the same. Even while they ignored him and singled him out. The author Malcolm Gladwell has a book called Blink, and he writes about how we have these subconscious expectations and ideas that inform our choices and inform how we respond and interact with one another. And he describes a tool that I think is really helpful. It's called an implicit association test. Implicit association test. And I am going to invite you to take the test today. Don't worry, there's no grade. I won't even know how you answer. So here's how it works. Let me see if I can. Oh, I'm pressing the wrong button. Okay. So you have male and female. And this is just a little practice test. And what you're going to do is you're going to just notice what side male is on and what side female is on. And I'm going to go through a list of names. And as I do, you're going to associate them, each name with male or female. And maybe, why don't you use your hands, maybe put them on your lap. And so you have a right hand and a left hand. And when I say a name you associate with male, just kind of, move your hand a little. We're keeping it subtle so no one knows how you're responding. And if it's female, you just kind of move your right hand a little bit. Make sense? Any questions? Okay. So here we go. John. Bob, Amy, Holly, Joan, Derek, Peggy, Jason, Lisa, Matt, Sarah. And that's it. How'd that go? Was it easy? Yeah, it's pretty easy, right? And the reason it's easy, because, you hear the name John and you probably think male. And so it's pretty immediate. It's pretty easy to associate. So that was your warm-up. Now we're going to take we're going to do a question that's actually from this implicit association test. So now you have two words on each side. One is male in career, and one is female in family. And so I'm going to say a word or a name, and it's either going to apply to one of these four categories, okay? And so it's not going to be male and career, it's going to be male or career or female or family. And so you're going to do the same thing. If I say a word or a name that you associate with, say, career, you'll just kind of move your left hand a little. And if I say one that you associate with family, you'll move your right hand a little. If I say one that you associate with male, it'll be your left hand. Female, right hand. Make sense? All right, here we go. Lisa, Matt, laundry, entrepreneur, John, merchant, Bob, capitalist, Holly, Joan, home, corporation, siblings, Peggy, Jason, kitchen, housework, parents, Sarah, Derek. How was that? Little harder, but still okay? Yeah? Pretty easy? Okay, one more. Indulge me. Okay, we're going to mix it up a little bit. Now on the left, if it relates to male or family, either one, you're going to move your left hand. And on the right, female or careers. I know some of you already see where this is going. All right, ready? Babies. Sarah, Derek, merchant, employment, John, Bob, Holly, domestic, entrepreneur, office, Joan, Peggy, cousins, grandparents, Jason, home, Lisa, corporation, Matt. How was that? It was harder. Was it harder? Yeah. If you are like most people, it was harder. It took you a little longer to put the word entrepreneur into the career or associate it with the career category when career was paired with female as when it was paired with male. And that's because most of us have stronger mental associations between maleness and career than we do between femaleness and ideas related to careers. And so male and capitalist go together in our minds a lot like John and male go together in our minds. But when the category is male and family, we have to stop, hesitate for a moment before we make our associations. And so the real implicit association test is taken typically on a computer, and it measures not just where you put things, it measures how long it takes you to do it. It measures every little millisecond of hesitation that you take. And so it creates a lot of data just on how you hesitate, not just on how you answer. And so you can go online and you can take any number in different categories of these implicit association tests. I've taken 3 of them. One that I took was on gender and career, which is what we just saw a sampling of. Now, understand, I am a woman, a cisgendered woman. I have a career. I believe that women should be in careers if they want to be in careers. Men should be in careers if they want to be in careers. But the test score that I got when I took the implicit association test on gender and career says that I generally associate family and female, like most people. And I associate maleness and careerness, and it's a hard thing for me to break. I learned all kinds of things growing up that I might not ever undo. And so we can imagine all the implications if most of us are in the boat, and according to their test, most of us are in the same boat on this, you can imagine the implications for women getting jobs in corporate settings or other settings, and how men experience staying at home, being a dad. I also took one of the race-related tests. And I want to tell you, I spend a lot of time thinking about race. I spend a lot of time observing how race and ethnicity play out in our world. I've led workshops on race, anti-racism, multiculturalism. I have a racially diverse network of friends and colleagues. I myself am racially diverse. My father is Chinese, my mother is European American. And according to the test, I still have a moderate, so mid-range preference for white people, which among millions of scores is the dominant preference. And I don't like saying any of that out loud. And it makes me wonder in our story for all ages whether most, if not anyone, at the dinner party were acting rudely, not so much on purpose, but because they had not examined their expectations of class and socioeconomics. So when Nasruddin entered the room looking a little underdressed and with day's dirt on his work clothes, maybe on his face, their implicit biases went into work. And they started acting on those biases without ever consciously thinking about it. And so when we talk about words like racism and white supremacy, sometimes we're talking about a conscious dislike of people of color. You know, think white nationalists, KKK, right? Conscious dislike. And sometimes when we use words like racism, white supremacy, sometimes we're talking about a dislike of people of color that is more implicit than explicit, more buried in that subconscious. And it might be so buried in the subconscious that we try to deny that the dislike or bias is even there. We tell ourselves it isn't there. We might believe that we don't see race, or if we do see it, that we don't act upon whatever negative ideas we grew up with. And so when we use words like racism and white supremacy, we often wish there were different words depending on the severity, or depending on the presence or absence of violence, or whether it's conscious or unconscious. But there isn't a different word. And so we accept that the history and the legacy of racism is so pernicious and so devastating that finding a gentler word for how it manifests in our communities and in us as individuals just isn't really that important. What is important is taking the time to deconstruct our conscious and subconscious ideas of race. In October and November, Linda Sanders and I are going to be leading a small group discussion for 8 weeks. We're going to be discussing a book by Robin DiAngelo, and there's information about it in your order of service. But when I was attending the facilitator training this past week, we were invited to consider a question. When is the first time you remember being aware of your race? When is the first time that you remember thinking about your whiteness or your blackness or whatever racial identity you have? It's a good question to be thinking about. My first memory of race came when I was about 6 or 7 years old. My family was new to the neighborhood where my parents still live now. And my older brother was about 8 or 9 years old, and he was a Cub Scout. And in that first year that we lived in the neighborhood, I accompanied him around the neighborhood, going door to door as he sold light bulbs as a fundraiser for his Cub Scout troop. And so we had our little red wagon filled with little boxes of light bulbs, and we went door to door. And one woman invited us into her house, and as we stood there in her entryway, she told us that she was not going to buy any light bulbs from us. She said she didn't actually believe that there were light bulbs in the boxes. She took a box of light bulbs from my brother's hands and threw it to the floor and told us to get out of her house and go back where we came from. Now, she would later apologize for not knowing that we lived in the neighborhood. But she would never apologize for thinking that white is better. And she would never apologize for communicating to 2 young children that they were anything less than beautiful, anything less than whole. I sometimes try to imagine what she expected from us. That we were two young, disadvantaged, darker-skinned children who had somehow made their way from a poor urban neighborhood, pulling their red wagon all the way up Falk Road with empty boxes, trying to swindle suburban white folks into forking over a few dollars. I also try to imagine what she expected from her neighborhood, that it would stay how it always was, inhabited by property owners whose skin tone and facial features resembled hers. Like the wealthiest man in town in our story for all ages today, she didn't want to open her door to someone who would make her feel uncomfortable. But sometimes that's the way it is. We encounter one another in our neighborhoods, on the streets, in stores, in work, at school, and we have these hidden expectations of one another, that they're going to trick us, or they're going to hurt us, or that they're ignorant or rude, or they don't speak the language that we speak, or that they're in our way, or taking our resources, or slowing us down. But we Unitarian Universalists, we want to be the people who embrace one another no matter what. We want to enter the story of Nasruddin, and when he comes in muddy and hungry and tired from a day of work and fasting, we, good people of faith that we are, we want to place ourselves into that story, and we want to say, welcome. Ignore their sideways glances. Ignore their rudeness. Welcome. You must be hungry. Don't worry that working all day has made you dirty and that you haven't had time to go home and change. Welcome anyway. Come, eat. Don't let them tell you that you are anything less than beautiful. Don't let them tell you that you are anything less than whole. But sometimes there is no such person in this story, is there? 5 years ago, UCLA's Civil Rights Project issued a report finding that segregation by race and class is intensifying in Delaware. And last month, the News Journal reported an Associated Press study that found that juveniles were more likely to be shot in Wilmington than any other United States city. I get email alerts for every shooting in Wilmington. It tells me whether the victim survived, and it states their gender identity and their age. And I hate getting these emails. But getting them keeps me grounded in the reality that young men, particularly young Black and brown men in our communities, are dying and at risk in large numbers. And these emails remind me of another fact, that we are not appalled enough about what is happening in our community. Which reminds me that I have been brainwashed. We have these conscious and subconscious beliefs about one another that get in our way of caring about one another. I think sometimes about the fact that as a country, we manage to literally get people to the moon and back safely. What an incredible feat. But somehow we cannot make progress toward healing our manufactured ideas that white is good and Black is bad. And the statistics, at least here in Delaware, the statistics say that we're actually moving backward. The book about which Linda and I will be leading a discussion is called White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. And the author reminds me over and over again how important it is for us to talk about race, to talk about racism. White liberals tend to think that not talking about race, not acknowledging race, keeping it in that subconscious space is how we deal with the discomfort of race and racism. But the truth is, the lack of acknowledgement is what helps racism to thrive. The best conversation I've ever had about race was a couple of years ago. It was in a class of children who were 4, 5, and 6 years old. It was one of our Unitarian Universalist congregations, Sunday morning class. There were 6 of us, and we sat on the floor in a circle, and we all put our hands in the middle of the circle, and we just looked at our hands. That's all we did, looked at each other's hands. And then I asked us to think about how they're the same and how they're different. And one of the children was so excited and just blurted out, he said, "They're all the same!" As if he already knew that all hands everywhere are all the same. Another child seemed very surprised by that. And he said, "Well, not really all the same." And I said, "Well, tell me more. What do you see that's different?" And he said, "Well, your hands are bigger, and they have more lines." And so we went around the circle, and I held up my hands to each of the children's hands, and we agreed, yes, my hands were bigger, and yes, they have more lines. And we looked at the lines on my hands, and we noticed what was different, what was the same. They noticed the rings on my fingers. And then we put our hands back in the center for more noticing. I said, "What else is the same? What else is different?" "We all have 5 fingers," one of them said. And so we counted each child's hands. Indeed, everyone had 5 fingers on each hand. What else? They're different colors. I said, "What are different colors?" And he said, "The outside is different colors." Now, his skin was the darkest in our circle. He is mixed race, Mexican and European American. And I said, "Yes, isn't that amazing? We all have different skin colors." And I said, "What color is our skin?" There was a redheaded, fair-skinned girl in the group, and she told us that her skin was white. And I said, "We do call your skin color white, don't we?" And she nodded in agreement. And I said, "But is it white? I mean, is it white like a piece of paper is white?" And they all just sat there in a very long silence as they thought about that. And so I grabbed a piece of paper and put it in the middle of the circle. And one of the children laughed, and he said, "No, it's not white like a piece of paper is white." And then we wondered what it is. What would we call those colors? What would we call our skin tone? Is it peach? Is it tan? Is it pink? And we spent time imagining what are the real colors of what we call white skin. And then we talked about other colors. We talked about black as a skin color and brown. I mentioned how some people consider my skin yellow, and they thought that was pretty funny. We got more construction paper out, and we held it up to our hands. And the girl with the red hair, we talked about hair too, and the girl with the red hair, she shared that her hair was red, and then we talked about red hair color, and we held up a piece of red construction paper, and we decided that her hair was actually a little more orange than it was red. And then we wondered, why would we exaggerate color so much when it comes to skin and hair? I asked them what color, the girl with the red hair thought that one of the children with black hair and I had the same color hair. And the child with black hair said, "No, her hair is silver. It's not black." So there was a lot of chaos and a lot of confusion in this conversation. There's also a lot of wondering. And in that class of young Unitarian Universalists, we did not heal any impact of white supremacy. We didn't fix anything. But we wondered about these exaggerations of color, and we normalized our differences as good. And we wondered, too, about the possibilities. I wonder how many different colors of skin there are in the world. I wonder how beautiful it would be to have all of those colors in one place at one time. I wonder how many different colors of hair there are in the world. I wonder what causes freckles. I wonder how many freckles one person can have. And we did something quite radical. We talked across racial differences about race. We remained curious and honest. We took risks to share our perceptions. We didn't need to know all the answers. We didn't need to sound smart. We acknowledged out loud our expectations around color and difference, and we remained open to shifting those expectations. It was one of the most woke group of people I have ever encountered. My friend and colleague Aisha Hauser once said that being woke isn't about achieving some place of knowing everything about race, but it's about remaining curious about what we know and what we don't know. And so imagine if Nasruddin had arrived at that dinner party to a room full of curious people. They didn't have to unpack everything about socioeconomics and class, but imagine if they were just curious. My, Nasruddin, you have mud everywhere. Your day must have been more interesting than mine. Come and tell me about it. Or you look like you worked hard today. You must be starving. Come and eat. And so as we celebrate Peace Week, I think it's a good time to commit to this curiosity and wonder, this challenging of expectations. What harmful expectations are keeping you from welcoming others, seeing others fully, and radiating back every person's beauty and wholeness? What are your conscious thoughts that get shaken up with regard to race and class? What are your subconscious thoughts? And remembering that we have the ability to send people to the moon and back, could we raise the bar on how we understand race and class and how it impacts our community? Could we learn to expect way more justice as a nation, as a community, in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Increasing segregation and increasing violence is not who we are. It is time for us to build a new way. I invite you to rise and affirm with me our closing hymn, Building a New Way.